Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is the Ukraine War news update for the 17th of May 2023. I'm going to talk quite a bit about the Patriot air defense system and the damage that's been caused to that. There's quite a lot of news about that today. I can make it into a separate video, but time and all that. But we'll go straight, first of all, to the general stuff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. 610 liquidated personnel, that's there or thereabouts. 9 tanks, bit of an uptick. It's a bad day for the Russians in terms of tank losses. 17 APCs, so your infantry fighting vehicles, APCs, vehicles like that. That's a massive loss. Again, we've had several days of really high attrition of that type of equipment. 16 artillery systems. We had 3 days in the 20s, a couple of days in the late teens. They are getting hammered in terms of artillery here. And this could be as a result of activities going around the flanks of Bakhmut, where apparently the Ukrainians have taken something like 20 square kilometers, although they are teetering on the edge of losing the town itself. There's a game of two halves there, really. But I think they've probably captured a lot of equipment there and destroyed others, as well as we've seen evidence of them taking out. It seems that this is pretty explicit in terms of the coming counteroffensive, taking out pieces on the Zaporizhia front and pieces along the Dnipro River in Kherson Oblast. So the Ukrainians are really, it seems, trying to take out artillery, and for good reason. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, that is significant, although we don't know what they are. Could they be S-300s? That's really huge. Are they books somewhere in the middle, or are they autocannons on the back of a truck? I don't know. 16 drones and 9 cruise missiles. That's from the night before, not last night. They often compile this data before, in the evening, and then they might get cruise missile attacks, and they miss out the chance of adding them to the day's statistics for which they are more relevant. But nonetheless, that's from the evening before. And then we have 19 vehicles and fuel tanks. It's a massive number again, wide-ranging sort of. There's a wide range of what that equipment could be. As it says, vehicles, well, any number of options there, and fuel tanks. So, but nonetheless, it looks like Ukraine are really trying to hammer logistics and uh, reduce the Russians' ability to defend as effectively as they might want, given the coming counteroffensive. And then this final one, 7 pieces of special equipment. The average was way under 1 a day for this. And then recently we had days of 3, 4, 7, like today or yesterday, 7 pieces of special equipment. Yes, there's a wide range of what that could be. Special equipment might be electronic warfare, it might be deminers, it might be excavators. Anyway, I think ahead of the counteroffensive, the Ukrainians are really trying to restrict the Russian ability to do ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. So that we're seeing electronic warfare, but we're seeing camera surveillance and radar, little radar units and things like that, but getting taken out regularly. Anyway, that is a really good day, I think, for the Ukrainians there, and the Russians are going to have a really difficult time going forward if they keep losing APCs, tanks, and artillery systems at that rate. It's just phenomenal. Right, we're going to talk quite a lot about the Patriot air defense system being damaged and the attack from 2 nights ago, because there's so much rhetoric coming out from pro-Russians. In my threads, they've been saying stuff like all this hurrah, and that actually they don't really understand what a devastating loss this was for the Russians, right? And this isn't me being all cope and all that. Oh, look at the copium, they'll say in the threads below, because they have no ability to actually construct substantive arguments. No, this is actually genuinely a success for the Ukrainians, and let me explain. Nonetheless, I said the other day we need to be careful. I did a video on this yesterday talking about actually we don't have enough data yet to be able to conclusively say that a part of the air defense battery, Patriot battery, has been damaged or destroyed or whatever. But yet we had Russians claiming a Patriot air defense system was blown up, and actually that entails a whole bunch of different stuff spread over like a kilometer, and in fact you can have one of the pieces up to 30 kilometers away. So you're not going to have blown up a battery, you're going to have blown up at most a part of it. What part that is kind of the important point. So CNN then yesterday, after I made my video, said a US-made Patriot air defense system was likely damaged but not destroyed as a result of Russian missile barrage in and around Kyiv early Tuesday morning. A US official tells CNN. The US is still assessing to what degree the system was damaged, the official says. That will determine whether the system needs to be pulled back entirely or simply repaired on the spot by Ukrainian forces. Right. Apparently, it can be repaired in Ukraine. So, US Patriot system, according to the Telegraph here, which defends the airspace over Kyiv, is not likely to be removed from Ukraine after it was reportedly damaged in Tuesday's exceptional overnight barrage of the Ukrainian capital. So, this is really significant. The damage, if we can trust these sources, is not huge. The Russian Defense Ministry had said the Kinjal missile had destroyed a Patriot air defense missile system, saying in a statement, a high-precision strike by a hypersonic Kinjal missile hit a US-made Patriot anti-aircraft missile system in the city of Kyiv. But of course, you know, that's different from a part of the system. Okay, the piece of video footage came out yesterday. Someone posted this in my thread, and thank you for that. I think they were thinking this showed it wasn't hit on Patriot. I was trying to work out what their position was. Anyway, I think this shows something cooking off a little bit. So you'll see the explosion here. We talked about all that yesterday, and then a little bit of cooking off going on with some other stuff. So that was cut off other videos I've seen. So I think that's possibly significant. Could show that it was a launcher, or kicking off some munition. I don't know. Or maybe not. But it just adds a little bit. Right. Then there's been loads of chatter talking about this. So Trentelenko says, to quote a message to me, Russia tried a concerted planned effort with ballistic missiles, drones, and cruise missiles in a multi-axis attack to degrade and swamp and then destroy defenses, and it failed. And he's quoting Thomas Tyner there. Ukrainians received around 20 M902 Patriot launchers. If they use half with PAC-3 and half with PAC-2, so those are PAC-3 are the latest generation, and PAC-2 earlier but still good. They have 160 missile interceptors and 40 aircraft interceptors ready to launch. As long as the US keeps providing PAC-3 interceptors, Russia can never hit Kyiv. Okay, so Trentelenko continues. Saturation attacks on the 2.5 missile batteries, because there's 2.5 batteries apparently, with 200 ready to launch missiles, are going to need a whole lot of attacking drones, missiles, and planes to guarantee success. Given a 90% hit rate, you need more than 180 attackers to get through the defense. And with 20 Patriot launchers plus radars plus command centers, you are going to need 40 plus to get through. And as for the assumption that those night pictures and videos are of Patriot launchers as opposed to NASAM, SAM-T, and IRIS-T launchers known to be in the Kyiv area, actually, that it seems it was a Patriot. That's it. That's a real reach. Ukraine's PSU SAM operators are the most combat experienced pros on the planet. Nothing Kyiv night sky that can be downed by AMRAAM, Asta 15, or IRIS-T would have gotten a Patriot PAC-3 MSE missile. The latest Patriot's missiles would have been saved for ballistic missiles, and Russia's used for land attack S-300 SAMs, for which see the PAC-3 below. Kyiv is defended, but PSU needs 5.5 more batteries of Patriot to have the defense it had in February 2022. So a little bit garbled there, but you get the idea. This Trentelenko is still really positive about the defense Kyiv has. And then we have Michael Weiss here saying another important point. So he's got contacts on the ground. He says, I'd be careful with these claims that Patriot system was damaged. More and more Ukrainian sources saying that there was not something to write home about. Kirby now appears to confirm this. Now, of course, that could be just in line to downplay something more significant, but Ukrainian Air Force tends to play it straight. Also, had it from a HUR source saying the same, for what it's worth. So he's got an intelligence source saying the same. Another important point here, Air Force is adamant nothing got through. So if something did happen due to falling debris, where did it fall and on what? So just to translate all of this from sources on the ground, the Air Force is still saying nothing got through. There's 100% inception rate. So the idea is that this could be debris falling on that and exploding, or something else, or a misfire, malfunction, or something. But the Ukrainians are still maintaining that they got 100% interception rate and all the missiles are shot down. So that tells you something. Now, could be misinformation, disinformation. It could be psyops. But as Michael Weiss says here, generally the Air Force are pretty straight up on what they're saying, and he's got a source on the ground that is also uh, confirming that. And then John Ridge saying here, well, okay, a few other sources. I've received word through the grapevine that Ukrainian air defenders that damage to the Patriot, if any, was minimal. I'm not saying it's a concrete fact, just what the local forces are saying. So that's someone else with sources on the ground. John Ridge then says, I've heard more or less the same thing, and he's someone that's been making quite a lot of commentary on this. In fact, here's another one. So this is John Ridge again. Worth noting that there are a lot of caveats to this statement. That so Patriot's system was likely damaged but not destroyed. So that's a statement. It really depends on what, if any, components of the battery were co-located, so located together. It should be fairly trivial to replace a damaged launcher, but a damaged radar command post would be more problematic. So this is what I was talking about yesterday. I should also add that Patriot features both wired and RF data links that enable individual components of the system to be dispersed several kilometers from the CP, up to 30 kilometers in the case of the RL3 RF link. So it's probably very unlikely that the entire battery was located at one site. And then the Kiev Independent says, quoting CNN, US officials says Russia's expending more munitions to overwhelm Ukrainian air defense. So Russia's been using up more munitions recently in order to both overwhelm and confuse Ukraine's air defense. An unnamed US official familiar with the matter told CNN. So this is where I'm going to talk to you about how this has been an overwhelming success for the Ukrainians. Right. I talked yesterday about how there was some kind of pro-Russian source saying this has cost the Ukrainians loads of money because each Patriot missile is worth 5 million, and there's 30 then sent off there, so that's 150 million, so on and so forth. But actually, it's cost the Russians arguably more, or around about the same ballpark. So the night attack on Ukraine cost Russia at least $120 million. So 6 Kinjal, 9 caliber, 3 ballistic possibly from S-400, 6 Iranian Shahed drones, 3 Orlan and Supercam UAVs. So as it goes into detail here, each caliber missile is $6.5 million, so that's $58.5 million. Kinjal costs 10 million and above, so that's at least 60 million. And then you've got all these other bits and pieces, so it costs at least $120 million, right? But it's actually worse than that, because Russia can't make these things particularly, so the cost, one can assume, has gone up for them making this stuff, as they're having to get stuff off the black markets or whatever. And so if you're talking about value, like, the value to them is actually more than if they can't then make them, if they can't replace them, and actually the value of each individual Kinjal is much greater than the cost of producing it, if you see what I mean. So in fact, this has been really successful in costing the Russians a lot of money in doing this, and also in terms of the value of these missiles. Right, let's just a little bit more depth here. So usually the Russians would do saturation missile attacks that hit all around Ukraine, something that looks a little bit like this, right? And they may have a couple on Kiev. And what they're trying to do is find out where all the systems are around Ukraine and overwhelm them. And so they're all firing off, and no one's quite sure where everything's going. And some get through and some don't, so on and so forth. What happened is everything the other night was sent against Ukraine. And not only that, this is really important to understand this. And if you're pro-Russian in the thread and go, oh, cope, you need to listen to this, right? All of the missiles were sent at Kyiv, right? And all of the missiles were sent at the Patriot air defense system. In other words, it appears that Russia have got spooked. Ukrainians got Patriot air defense system. They've announced the world, we've got that. They're here around Kyiv. We know that one Kinjal got shot down before, where they're kind of testing out where stuff was, and then they sent a whole bunch of stuff, which was not the biggest missile attack because they don't have huge stockpiles of missiles anymore. This is a problem. So they're using up what low stockpiles they have, and they're using up their very best missiles as well, the ones that can't get shot down. 6 Kinjals were sent, and 6 Kinjals were shot down, as according to the Ukrainians. So you've got 18 odd missiles and stuff shot down in and around Kyiv, but they were not going to attack. So when you look, what infrastructure was blown up, what military targets were hit, what this was hit, what that was hit, nothing. Again, Russians might claim otherwise, but it appears that nothing was hit, other than perhaps just one part of a Patriot air defense system, which you're going to expect. This is war, right? You're going to expect losses. But what Ukraine have done is they have it's a bit like a decoy, but it's not. It's a real thing. It's a Patriot. They've gone, here's our Patriot. Or like, we've got a Patriot around Kyiv. So the Russians have sort of found out where that is, sent all their stuff against it. And at the same time, all their best missiles have not hit meaningful targets. If you're going to attack the air defense system, then you're desperate and it's all going very wrong. It means that you are unable to hit meaningful targets in Kyiv. Right, the capital city is now defended in a way that you can't get stuff through effectively. And you have to try and spend all of your effort and money on taking out the system that's protecting Kyiv and all the targets rather than the targets themselves. That to me is a massive win. Right, Ukraine, that is a huge success, and that missile attack shows that. Now, pro-Russians are going to go, oh, Patriot missile system's been destroyed. No, it hasn't. A part of it's been damaged, and it appears like it can be repaired in Ukraine. Whoop-de-doo. Right, what the Russians lost? A load of expensive missiles that they are less able to reproduce than Ukraine is able to restock their air defense missiles. There is an asymmetry there, and that asymmetry is in the favor of Ukraine, and Russia have lost that exchange. Then you start seeing this, today's UK intelligence update says over the last week, the battle over the Russia-Ukraine border has intensified. On 13th of May 2023, 4 Russian aerospace forces aircraft, 2 combat jets and 2 helicopters crashed, apparently shot down over Russia's Bryansk region. I would argue that's 5. On May the 3rd, 2023, Ukraine achieved the first ever shoot down of a Killjoy. That's a Kinjal. That's a NATO designation. Air-launched ballistic missiles. Subsequently, Russia has prioritized attempting to neutralize Ukraine's improved air defense capabilities, but in the process has likely lost several more Killjoys, 6 of them. Yeah. The increased air threat over Russia's border region will be of exceptional concern for the VKS, because that's the Russian Air Force, because it uses the area to launch air power in support of the war. The apparent vulnerability of Killjoy is likely a surprise and an embarrassment for Russia. Russian President Vladimir Putin has touted the system as undefeatable. Then we hear at least 3 Russian scientists who developed the Kinjal hypersonic missile have been arrested on suspicion of treason over the past year. Their colleagues said in an open letter published on May the 15th, says the Moscow Times. So now we've got this realization from the Russian hierarchy that the Kinjal isn't as good as they'd said it was, and it can be taken down by Patriot. It's an undefeatable missile system. Oh dear, it's been taken down. And as a result of this kind of possible realization that it's not quite up to spec, I don't know what is going on in these murky areas, but it appears, at least from this source from Moscow Times, that 3 of them have been arrested, and I would say that's probably connected to the fact that it's not as good as they claim it is. Anyway, the end result is that the Russian missile barrage against Kyiv the other night shows that Russia are not in a good position, and it shows that Ukraine are in a much better position than they were. And that whole exchange was an overwhelming success for Ukraine. That's not just me trying to sell this. It's literally like what has been going on here. It's if you are sending all of your missiles against one air defense system at the expense of actually hitting anything else in Ukraine, job done. Then I start thinking, right, having a bit of a conversation with myself last night about, goodness me, what can Russia do? What can they how can they succeed at all? It's only going one way. That asymmetry in capability is only going to continue to widen as Ukraine are being given better and better stuff, and Russia are unable to make their best stuff and replace lost stuff. It only goes one way. Again, I go back to the article I wrote in April 2022, which is Putin can't win here. He can't win. He's now thrown the very best he can against Kyiv and basically failed. Oh dear, Russia. Oh, very dear. CNN, Ukraine has used Storm Shadow missiles to strike Russian targets. So this is now an official admission that these have been used. Ukrainian forces have already started using UK-provided Storm Shadow long-range missiles to hit Russian targets. CNN reported on May the 16th, citing 3 Western officials. The officials did not specify when and for what purposes they've been used. And obviously um, the Ukrainian ministry has declined to comment on that. But yeah, we saw that it seemed they've used these storm shadows to attack Luhansk a number of times. Now, just going back to my original before I went off on my Kinjal rant, here we have just supporting the use of FPV drones I talked about yesterday. There's so much usage of these, but also supporting the claims about the number of tanks and the number of APCs that lost. This is just a montage video, and I think almost all of these hits of FP drones are in Mariinka. I could be wrong here, but it seems like there's a really successful team of these drones a team of drone operators operating in Mariinka, and you can just see they are taking out piece after piece after piece. And these montage videos just show you how effective these first-person view drones with attached RPG-7, I think, warheads are, and that looked to be that special equipment, a couple of pieces of special equipment there, and then other vehicles, all sorts stuff hiding. So that video itself is like, well, there's a dozen bits of kit just with almost certainly one group of FPV operators. You start extrapolating that across the front line, and Ukraine have got a success on their hands there in terms of the use of that. Russian media reports that a drone dropped 2 bombs on a border checkpoint in the Belgorod region again, after which a building caught fire. So that's 2 days in a row the Ukrainians using these drones to drop munitions inside the Russian border. There are also reports about the fall of an unknown drone about 100 kilometers from Moscow. So again, still throwing out these long-range drones, getting towards Moscow, getting down near Moscow. But of course, that is fixing the air defense systems in place so they can't bring them to the front line. If you're sending stuff to different places in Russia, then Russia have to keep their air defense systems in Russia. Okay. There has been, Vitaly Kim, the governor of Mykolaiv here, well, not here, but has elsewhere, slammed the Russians for their attack last night. Breaking news says this is a bit tongue-in-cheek. Russia destroyed another Patriot air defense system. It was hiding in a Mykolaiv supermarket. So they struck a supermarket. That's where you're at, Russia, isn't it? Okay. Inside Moscow, the Moskvich plant is on fire. Big old fire there. I don't know whether this is connected. Emergency services had to bring a helicopter to fight a huge fire in Moscow today. Storage area was pressed with pressed paper went up in flames in southwest of the city. I don't think that is the same. So yeah, two examples of fire in Moscow, in Russia's capital. Right, let's move on. I know I've spent too long on that kind of stuff. Let's go to odds and sods here. ISW, so the Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, says Russia is likely committed to reinforcing offensive efforts in Bakhmut. So as the success around the flanks for the Ukrainians has been apparent, it looks like the Russians are sending reinforcements there so that they don't have a complete disaster on their hand. Despite Ukraine's successful counterattacks around Bakhmut in Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces have likely committed to reinforcing offensive efforts in the area. So we'll see whether that is on the interior or trying to hold positions on the flanks. Now, what else? Here we have Ukraine charges suspected traitor for deceiving Mariupol Marines into surrender. This is going back to activities from April last year. Mariupol held out till, what was it, 17th of May or something last year. There was some surrendering of Marines. I'm sure this was, well, I don't know the full details of this, but it looks like it was just before the end when a bunch of Marines surrendered, and there was going to be some deal about them getting exchanged or something, and then it didn't happen. Something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. But here, Ukraine state Ukraine's State Bureau of Investigation served a notice of suspicion of high treason to the logistics chief of the 501st Marine Battalion, who reportedly deceived 277 Marines into surrendering in Mariupol in April 2022. The agency doesn't name the suspect, but Ukrainska Pravda claims it's Konstantin Bezmutini, probably butchered that, referring to its sources in law enforcement agencies, and notes that the notice was served in absentia. I don't know if this guy's done a runner. The investigation revealed that the head of the battalion's logistics service colluded with Russians and persuaded the commander to surrender during the defense of Mariupol, leading the soldiers to be misled and transferred to the so-called Donetsk People's Republic instead of relocating as ordered. The soldiers were deceived and therefore did not and could not realize the unlawful nature of the order or the surrender directive. So I think there was a directive against them for desertion or something, and that's been kind of overturned because they were basically deceived by their own. So that is significant. Supreme Court votes to dismiss its chief alleged of taking a $3 million bribe. This is going back to before the war, as far as I understand it, where he was in a bribery case or a fraud case, I think, false information case. Yeah, he um, found for one side, and it was all a bit dodgy, and there was accusations of him taking $3 million bribe. Anyway, they voted. It was 140 out of 142 judges voted in favor of him. Yeah. Being dismissed, and he is presently detained. So there's all this work going on at the moment to clear up corruption in Ukraine. And although you might say that's terrible, look at this, it's corruption. Yes, it is terrible, and it is corruption. But at least he's been found, and they're doing something about it. So it's kind of double-edged sword, that, isn't it? Convicts serving with Wagner mercenary group are reportedly being given arbitrary 3-month extensions to their contracts as punishment for even minor transgressions, according to men captured near Bakhmut. So I had been wondering about this previously, thinking that the Wagner would not let some of their soldiers who have been convicts, who've been serving their 6-month contract, then being allowed to go free and return to Russia, rather than to go back to prison. I was thinking that I'm sure they'll be keeping a bunch of these on, especially as they are unable to recruit in prisons. It turns out that is the case, that they are just saying, "Oh, you've done this thing wrong. That's a 3-month extension to your 6-month contract. Sorry about that." And it seems like they're arbitrarily finding things that these guys have done wrong in order to do that. So that's happening. Okay. So I want to just spend a little bit of time on this, because this has been hitting the threads. My own threads there were Russian bots spreading this lie. So more information over the past day. More misinformation over the past day. There's been claims of a massive radiation spike in Lublin, Poland, as a result of the Khmelnytsky aviation munitions depot being destroyed a few days ago. The conspiracy theory from the pro-Russian crowd, because this air monitoring radiation detector over 400 kilometers away had an increase in their sampling, must mean that the Russians destroyed a vast quantity of depleted uranium and is now raining toxic radiation across Europe. Took me a while to find a link, which is attached below. First, let's look at the radiation monitoring across Ukraine to see if there's been any increase in the sort of at any of the other stations between Ukraine and the Polish border. The answer is no. See the monitoring website here. Now, what can cause massive fluctuations in Poland? From the university, quote, large fluctuations in the level of radioactivity are caused mainly by changes in the content of one of the natural components, Bi-214. This nucleus comes from the decay of U-238. Uranium is a natural component of soil, and gangue, I don't know what that is, which is a contaminant of coal burned in large quantities. The isotope Bi-214 is found in the air in the form of aerosols and dust. Its concentration depends on many factors, including location of its local sources, wind direction, precipitation, that's rain. In the initial phase of precipitation, aerosols and dust are washed away and by raindrops and deposited on the detector cover. Then the number of counts increases. In the next phase, after flushing the impurities, the number of counts decreases. Changes in Bi-214 radioactivity are correlated with local weather conditions. What else could cause the increase? Quote, typical activities of the most common radionuclides in Polish soils are, and it goes through the details. The average activity of Rn-222 in the air near the ground is about 4.4 BQ per cubic meter. but in one-story buildings it may exceed 200 BQ per cubic meter. Human activity related to the extraction and processing of minerals, coal, combustion, nuclear energy, nuclear explosions, etc., causes a redistribution of natural radionuclides and an increase in the natural background level, especially in the local dimension. As a result of burning about 150 million tons of hard coal in Poland, about 150 tons of radioactive uranium and 300 tons of radioactive thorium are released into the environment annually. They accumulate mainly in ashes from where they get into groundwater and soil. They are also released directly into the atmosphere along with smoke and dust. The activity of such ashes may even exceed 2,000 BQ per kilogram, so on and so forth. Right. Now, what was the source of the misinformation? So nobody's surprised it came from a pro-Russian Telegram channel called Il Russo, then spread to another Telegram channel, Dana916, and then to Twitter by Dana916, and then was published by Hal Turner radio show, which we can never forget has classic 50,000 Chinese troops were amassing on Canadian border to invade Maine and then bombed into oblivion. So basically it spreads misinformation, disinformation. Anyways, the narrative spread through the pro-Russian social media spheres like fire. Now, is there anything within the town that could cause a detector to trip or fluctuate? The answer is yes. On the south end of town, there is Bogdanka coal mine, which extracts, processes, and transports thermal coal. There you go. So they're relying on data that they don't particularly understand, that there is a much better explanation for that data, and other data disconfirms the Russian claims, the pro-Russian claims, and that data disconfirm it is the fact that those spikes aren't found anywhere else outside of this Polish station that is quite a long way away from Khmelnytsky. So take a long walk off a short pier, because it ain't worth jack. Right, okay. Let's move on to military aid. So German company Hensoldt has pledged to transfer 6 more TRM L4D high-performance radars to Ukraine. So you're talking about upgrading Ukrainian capabilities? Here it is. Hensoldt already has several of these radars under contract for Ukraine as part of the IRIS-T SLM air defense system. That's a medium-range air defense system. The SLS is a short range, so that's medium range has a greater capability there. That is really good news. The Romanians have delivered a bunch of howitzers. These are the M1981. Ukraine receives a bunch of Romanian M1981 howitzers. They're basically based on an old Chinese one, I think, which is itself, I think, based on the D-20 Soviet howitzer. But these are upgraded in the 1980s, 1981. Who knew? Yeah, they've been well, they're made in 1981, I think, upgraded since then. Yeah, 1981 model, 1990 modernized. Yeah, so there you go. So these things can be very useful for the Russians, for the Ukrainians. Sorry, obviously they need the ammunition, but that's great that the Romanians have given them a bunch of those. We have seen, right, Britain is to send some suicide drones. This is a Telegraph report. In the UK will send Ukraine hundreds of suicide drones. It has custom built to support Kyiv on the battlefield. The announcement came as Zelensky met with Sunak. The kamikaze drones have a range of more than 125 miles. That's more than twice as far as HIMARS, and complement the long-range Storm Shadow missiles that the UK has donated last week. Last Saturday, Ukraine fired the cruise missiles for the first time, hitting Russian supply depot and military command center 80 miles behind the front line. Defense sources conceded to the Telegraph that the drones were one way, adding that they had primary goal to carry munitions. They've been rapidly developed and adapted at significantly lower cost than others, they said, adding that they have a comparable effect to an artillery shell. So this is the ability to basically lob artillery 125 miles. Source said that the secrecy was because of commercial confidence in the drones was still going through the later stages of procurement, before adding they will be delivered in the coming months. Excellent news. Right, the UK and Netherlands have agreed to create a coalition to purchase fighter jets for Ukraine, Le Monde writes, citing Downing Street after a meeting between Sunak and Mark Rutte, the Dutch number one. The British Prime Minister and Prime Minister Rutte have agreed that they will work to build an international coalition to provide Ukraine with combat air capability, providing support in everything from training pilots to the purchase of F-16 fighters. And that's been, widely reported. There's an article in The Guardian, is probably the one in the UK that's been most linked about this. But also, We are hearing that Belgium is willing to train Ukrainian fighter pilots. I don't know if this is part of that same coalition on F-16s, but for now, they're not going to provide the aircraft themselves. 2 F-16AM will leave service by the end of this year in Belgium, and they will have, because they will have reached 8,000 flight hours, and then they'll be used for spare parts rather than given to Ukraine. Ukraine does not, but okay, so that's loads of stuff going on with that, and indeed France is, I think, involved in some way, has talked about this as well. So I don't know if they'll be part of the coalition. So that's really good news. What is needed. On the other hand, this is interesting communication here from Zelensky, because we have heard previously that they weren't ready. They don't have enough stuff. Then they were claiming that they were ready, and now we're going back to don't have enough stuff. So, but is this psyops? So Ukraine does not have enough military equipment to launch a counteroffensive against Russia, according to the deputy head of Zelensky's office, Ihor Zokva. Writes Sky News, quote, unfortunately, the level of equipment we have is not yet enough to start the counteroffensive. To start a counteroffensive, with the result being the liberation of Ukrainian territories, you need enough artillery systems and ammunition. You need armored vehicles and tanks. So this could be that they genuinely are waiting for these, and there is the need for all that stuff, and they will need, the longer they wait, the more stuff they're going to have, right? But it could be, yeah, we need to wait a lot longer for this stuff, and then literally 2 days later attacking type misinformation, so, or disinformation for strategic reasons. So who knows? We've heard both sides of that so far. So, okay, as a response to the coming counteroffensive, in the rear of the front line, Russia is moving massive amounts of equipment around, presumably using intel or guesswork to prepare for Ukraine's advance. The occupiers are carrying out a mass transfer of equipment. These were heading north of Mariupol and to Polohy. So again, kicking around the Zaporizhia area, that's where the Russians are sure that Ukrainians are going to attack. I'm pretty sure they're going to attack around there as well. So not much on the geopolitics front. In fact, only one bit. You'll be happy to know then that you can go and do your daily business. In Tbilisi, people. So I reported yesterday that the Georgians are going to allow air transport between Russia and Georgia. So they're going to have planes again, flights between the two countries. That has been a governmental decision. There's issue with the Georgian government and being pro-Russian and so on and so forth. In Tbilisi, people took to a mass rally to protest against the government's decision to resume flights from Russia. And this is a video from local media. So that is good. Good from the Georgian people there. Excellent. Okay, that's the end of today's video. Sorry, it's another long one. Sorry. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all of your support. Thank you so much to the members. Thank you to those who have upgraded their membership. I'm just honoured. Really am. It's just amazing. I really appreciate all of your support. And please continue to comment in the way you do in the comment threads. It's just hugely gratifying. Really good stuff. The level of commentary you guys give and the information some of you have, the expertise that some of you have is fabulous. Thanks. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.